car. Gimmicks one, that's why they to the back leave it. So did you come? Will creep before you walk. That's why they to the back leave it. So did you come? To the back leave it. Just I come like a nuclear bomb. Talk to the boys, talk to the girls, talk to the woman, talk to the man, talk to the bench, talk to the young generation. I get them song, bang, 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 bang.